What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at 12 new subclasses coming to Baldur's Gate 3 alongside a host of other features that will be dropping in patch 8 sometime in the new year. But a couple of days ago, Larian announced all of this via one of their community updates, so I'm a little behind the ball here, mostly because Thanksgiving was this week here in the US, so my schedule's been a bit thrown off. And what's more, because I was busy, I did not initially realize that they actually announced all of those subclasses as well. So we have a little bit to talk about what to expect from those and which ones are being added, including a lot of highly requested ones like the Hexblade for the Warlock, a personal favorite of mine. But to get the other stuff out of the way as well, the upcoming patch 8 will also be introducing full crossplay and cross-progression support alongside a fully realized photo mode. And considering that was about all of the news we had received prior, the fact that they are also planning to add these new subclasses is pretty big news, especially since they'll be apparently dropped in a free update. But given that we know they were working on DLC at one point, I do have to wonder if some of these subclasses weren't initially concepted as part of that, only for those DLC plans to get scrapped, and maybe they just decided to roll that content into something useful for people anyway, but that's just guesswork on my part. Now let's get to the meat of the video and the really important stuff to talk about, these new subclasses. Including, as I mentioned, a lot of highly requested ones like the Swashbuckler, the Hexblade, the Death Domain Cleric, just to name a few. But starting at the very top, we have the College of Glamour Bard. Now, I believe they're going to be doing some homebrewing on this one, just from what I've read, as their update described them using their abilities in a way that the rules as written, so to speak, have not actually defined. For instance, at level 3, they get Mantle of Inspiration, which allows them to give temp HP to people around them, as well as when they gain those temp HP, it allows them to use their reaction once for movement up to whatever their speed happens to be. But in Larian's wording, when enemies attack you, this can potentially charm them, which will then let you activate Mantle of Majesty, a level 6 ability, to let you cast Command without using up spell slots. But that is generally just what Mantle of Majesty does, so I'm curious if they will relegate that specifically to charmed targets or what. And then in addition to that, at level 3, they also typically get another sort of charm that allows them to dominate a person and get them to do their bidding in some way, typically just short of actual violence unless they were already willing to fight for you. But I could see that ability being hard to implement. So one way or another, I think the College of Glamour Bard will wind up getting some refinements at the very least. Then we have the Path of the Giant Barbarian. This is a cool one. It kind of really goes all in on throwing things, which is already a very popular and strong way to play the game, so this will likely roll right into that. At level 3, they get to pick up a cantrip of either Druidcraft or Thaumaturgy. At level 3, while they are raging, any successful thrown weapon using strength gets to add your rage modifier to the damage, and you also get increased reach of 5 feet and typically increase in size up to large, which should also increase your damage. So that's pretty great. And then at level 6, they pick up Elemental Cleaver, which allows them to add elements to their weapons in order to deal elemental damage of whatever that type happens to be. And what's more, whatever weapon you apply this to picks up the Thrown property, allowing you to not only much more easily throw the weapon at people, but it also states that it will instantly return to your hand when it does so, which should be a lot of fun for people. And what's more, at level 10, they pick up Mighty Impel, which allows them to use a bonus action to just throw people. So I think that one will wind up being a lot of fun for everyone. Then we have the Death Domain Cleric, a cleric all about death, of course. Now at level 1, they pick up Reaper, giving them a cantrip from the Necromancy school, and when they use a cantrip that would normally only target one creature, it will hit 2 targets if they are close enough, that is to say within 5 feet of each other. And apparently Larian will be augmenting this with new cantrips and things to come. Now their Channel Divinity at level 2 just allows them to apply necrotic damage to their weapon attacks with Channel Divinity, and that damage is 5 plus your cleric level. Now at level 6, they get probably the most important ability here, which is Inescapable Destruction. This allows their necrotic damage from their cleric spells and Channel Divinity to ignore resistance to necrotic, and given how common that is in this game, will be pretty much required to make this particularly useful. Now at level 8, they get Divine Strike, and just like every other cleric, this will let them use necrotic damage, in this case, So I think that'll be fun for people. Now Druid is getting Circle of the Stars, which allows them to take on the form of various constellations which give them various benefits. In particular, they have the form of Archer, Chalice, or Dragon, each of them kind of lending themselves to a particular playstyle of a healer, a fighter, or a strategist. And then at level 6, they get Cosmic Omen, which will allow them to either add bonuses to your character's rolls for like attacks, saving throws, or ability checks, or subtract the same number, a d6, from enemies that attempt to do these things. So that'll be a pretty versatile subclass, I would say, if nothing else. Now, then we have the Paladin Oath of the Crown subclass, which is, I would say, mostly going for a more tanky aspect. So their tenets as a Paladin are very straightforward, pretty much just law, courage, and being an upstanding citizen. But then their abilities and things like Channel Divinity basically allow them to do things like taunt enemies or redirect damage from your allies to themselves via their ability Divine Allegiance at level 7. So clearly a bit more of a tanky option for people. Now the fighter is picking up Arcane Archer, which is kind of like, say, Battle Master, but for archers, as you might imagine. Starting at level 3, they pick up Arcane Shot, which will allow them to apply one of your Arcane Shot options to that attack, and you'll pick these up as you go, but you have all sorts of options, such as Banishing Arrow, which can remove enemies to the Feywild for a turn, Piercing Arrow, which is self-explanatory, Bursting Shadow, etc. So basically it just lets you play a ranger that can use magic to sort of diversify what individual arrows are going to be able to do. Now, one ability for this subclass that I'm curious if they'll put in is actually Curving Shot, which they pick up at level 7, which allows them to, when they make an attack roll and miss with a magical arrow, they can use a bonus action to re-roll the attack against a different target within so many feet of the original, which is an interesting little ability, and I don't see any reason they couldn't put it in there, so I guess we'll see what happens. Now, for Monk, we have the Drunken Master, which is going to give Monk characters a ton of extra speed and free disengage actions as part of Flurry of Blows, being able to get up from the prone position with only a small expenditure of movement as opposed to half of your speed typically. And they can also pick up Redirect Attack, which allows them to, when creatures attack and miss you in melee, you can redirect it to hit another creature that's within 5 feet. And then at level 11, they typically pick up Drunkard's Luck, which allows them to spend their key points to cancel out disadvantage on certain rolls. But Monk is another class here that, thanks to some feats and how they work specifically in BG3, is already very, very strong, so it'll be curious to see what people do with that one. Now, Ranger gets Swarmkeeper, which sees a Ranger with a connection to a swarm of some sort. This is typically insects of some kind, but can also be things like birds. And this swarm can be directed to assist and aid you via, of course, attacking enemies, or even forcefully moving the enemy or you a certain ways. You'll also get a handful of magic this way as well, typically centering around evasion and control, of course. But at level 7, they typically pick up Writhing Tide, which will allow you to, as a bonus action, gain a flying speed of 10 and can hover via your swarm. And I'm curious to see if they'll throw that in there just because of how it may or may not affect certain environmental puzzles. And then finally, at level 11, their swarm just gets stronger. So overall, I think that'll be an interesting one to watch and see. It's got a lot of very specific flavor to it. But then coming up towards the last third, though, we then have the Swashbuckler Rogue. At 3rd level, they get the opportunity to hit creatures via fancy footwork, which means that creature can't make opportunity attacks against you for the next turn, so you can hit somebody and then move without fear of getting hit back. Also, at 3rd level, you'll get a bonus to your initiative rolls equal to your charisma, letting you move that much more quickly, and makes it a little bit easier to sneak attack lone enemies. At 9, they pick up Panache, which will give it disadvantage on a great many attack rolls, as well as inability to make opportunity attacks against characters that are not you. So that'll be a fun one, especially for the bonuses around initiative and stuff, to see how people mess around with it. The Sorcerer is also getting an interesting one with Shadow Magic. At 1st level, they pick up Dark Vision of 120 feet, and then at 3rd level, they learn the Darkness spell, which doesn't count against their sorcerer spells, but also by spending sorcery points to actually cast it, you'll be able to see through that darkness created by the spell via your dark vision, which can be pretty deadly. Now also at level 1 they pick up Strength of the Grave, which can cause you to drop to 1 hit point instead of actually falling to your downed state, with the exceptions of radiant damage or critical hits. At 6th level, they pick up Hound of Ill Omen, allowing you to summon a Howling Hound, and at the start of every turn, it's supposed to be able to track down enemies, even enemies that are hidden or in stealth, so that should be fun for certain sections of the game, I imagine. And while typically Shadow Walk would be a big ability that you'd get at level 14, Larian has already mentioned in this preview that they'll be moving it a bit earlier, it would seem, giving you access to Shadow Walk, which allows you to step from one shadow to another as a bonus action with a range of like 120 feet. So in particular, I think this Sorcerer will make for an interesting case around like certain types of honor mode runs, etc., because they have a lot of maneuverability that other classes simply won't, which will be fun. But that does bring us to my personal favorite 5th edition subclass period, which is the Hexblade Warlock. Now some of these features were rolled into Pact of the Blade for the regular BG3 Warlock, but now we get access to the full thing. So right away at level 1 they get Hexblade's Curse, which allows them to place a curse on people as a bonus action, and while that curse is in place against that enemy, you gain bonus damage to rolls against that target equal to your proficiency bonus. It also expands the crit range a little bit, allowing you to crit on a 19, and what's more, if that target dies, you regain hit points equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. But also at level 1, you gain proficiency with a bunch of stuff like medium armor, shields, and martial weapons to make you more effective at fighting things up close and personal, as is the point with a Hexblade. What's more though, you get to imbue your weapon to use your charisma modifier for your attack and damage rolls, which is what they rolled into Pact of the Blade. Now as a base, the subclass even outside of this game allows you to stack this with Pact of the Blade, letting you extend Pact Weapon to every Pact weapon, no matter what the weapon itself actually is. So again, some of that is how they rolled it into Pact of the Blade to begin with, so I think that should feel pretty natural. But at level 6, they pick up Accursed Spectre, allowing them to temporarily bind spirits of the people they just killed to their service. So this should let you perform a little mid-battle necromancy with a Hexblade as well, and then finally they get Armor of Hexes, which will force enemies hit by Hexblade's Curse to roll to miss basically an extra time against your character. So some new summons and some strong abilities straight from the get-go should make Hexblade a fun, viable option for how somebody like myself was already playing it anyway. And then last but not least, we have the Bladesinging Wizard. Basically, this subclass allows you to take a wizard in particular and make them a pretty handy dex martial fighter. At 2nd level, they gain proficiency with light armor if they don't already have it, alongside a one-handed melee weapon of your choice, as well as proficiency in performance. Now, also at level 2 here, you pick up Blade Song. As long as you're not wearing medium, heavy armor or a shield, you gain supernatural speed, agility, and focus. Using a bonus action to activate this, you'll gain a bonus to your AC equal to your intelligence modifier, which is huge. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You'll have advantage on dexterity checks for acrobatics, and a bonus to any concentration spell checks you happen to make. At level 6, they pick up extra attack, allowing them to attack more than once, of course. And at level 10, they get the ability to use their Blade Song when it is active in order to reduce incoming damage as well. So this is, as is pretty standard with these types of things really, going to let you play a more melee-oriented wizard if you should so desire, which has always been a pretty fun way to play more traditionally caster and range-based roles. Now that is pretty much everything worth mentioning for this little announcement they made. A lot of cool subclasses coming, alongside a host of other features, and much of this is going to expand a lot of what is in the game in ways you may not expect, such as adding new summons and new cantrips and everything. So this looks to be a really huge update, and I'm looking forward to checking it out sometime next year. So don't expect this for a little while yet, but it should be a good time. Now, with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.